intelligent automation team at Alberta Health Services. That's Canada's largest organization. And I thought it was the truckers on the border was the largest organization. Anyway, AHS has an IT team of over 2,700 and is working on a $1.5 billion IT program. Now think about that. IT is only part of the health system, right? So that's a pretty big deal. An IT leader with 20 years of experience, his background is focused on intelligent automation, including robotic process automation, totally relevant for today, software development, ETL processes, artificial intelligence, and analytics. And Jesse excels as an entrepreneur, founding a software development, virtual tour, mattress, and search engine optimization SEO company. I love it. So what Jesse represents for us is a very specific perspective, which is great around the healthcare space. Jesse, I will turn it over to you. Tell us about the wonderful achievements you've got.
Thanks, Chris. I'm just going to share my slide here quick. There we go. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining me. Look forward to sharing the story of Alberta Health Services and specifically in context of the automation work that we've been doing. We have been working on some really exciting things and look forward to sharing those with you. So a bit of background on Alberta Health Services. We are basically Canada's largest organization. We have 180,000 users of our systems, 127,000 staff, and the others are for the most part, fully funded companies, subsidiaries. We support 4.5 million Albertans. We are basically in the top 5 most integrated healthcare systems in the world. And just in terms of geography, Alberta is around 5 times as large as England and about 1.5 times as large as California. So IT, obviously a big IT team, and from a clinical perspective, we are one of the larger organizations. For those in the States, we're kind of in a comparable size to the Kaiser Permanentes of the world. Personally, like Chris shared, my background's in IT. I've been in IT for 21 years. Tons of experience on the automation, ETL processes, analytical, data warehousing, technical architecture, and then most recently, or not most recently, but marketing side, and of course a dad, so get to basically sling diapers as well. The summary is, at a high level, in 2007, we ended up starting to use robotic process automation, and so we were an earlier adopter. We have probably about 150 digital workers in Boston Workstation today, simply running reports. And there's a few other areas that they help with, but a lot of report running. In 2021, fast forward quite a few years, we jumped into releasing an RFP and awarded that to Blue Prism. And today we've gone basically from 0 to 91 digital workers and freed up around 17 FTEs, 17.3 I think is up this morning. So from a vision perspective, we're heavily focused on returning capacity back to the business. So as you can imagine, with the COVID and then the financial constraints of COVID, our organization is centered on trying to free up capacity, improving quality, helping the patients, and naturally our customers in the organization. Who are, there's a lot of different stakeholders through the development of digital workforce to augment our actual staff workforce. The principles are heavily focused on digital first. So we've got and I would add a bias toward action. So when we're looking at automation, we look at all the different options, and oftentimes there's a capability in system, there's a capability through RPA, there's a capability through software development, and we tend to side with the one that we can free up capacity the fastest. Communication is really key. I've got a future slide on change management, but the whole principle of ensuring that we have a very clear communication model is necessary for any RPA program, arguably more important than the techie stuff, to make sure that you are managing all of the resistance and the concerns that can come across, that can come from the business when you're implementing our RPA. One of the first steps, I think, in any RPA journey is to get all the executive sponsors together and decide what's the vision. What does success look like in this year or in 5 years? And so, in our case, we took a look at all the options, and we initially were focused on cost savings, which certainly has some a benefit, and the benefit is naturally, you know, the CFOs and the people that are sponsoring the program can take that and actually offset some of the cost of the investment in the automation CUE, which is natural. Unfortunately, when you're only centered on cost savings, you miss a lot of the opportunities that can come from cost avoidance, which innately almost always turns into cost savings because you're avoiding costs that don't need to be invested in the future. So we've shifted focus. We've gone and now we're looking at total savings, which is super exciting. It's allowed us to actually invest in a lot of automations that are freeing up capacity, which are making a really big difference. From a structure perspective, there are certainly a lot of them that are out there, centralized, federated. Naturally, we've gone with the centralized model. From a governance structure perspective, you can see we've got the executive sponsors at the very top, and frankly, this is your number one success criteria for any automation CUE. So we were fortunate. We've actually landed 2 executive sponsors that are direct reports to the CEO, which in our organization is a big deal because a lot of our staff, we have up to 8 management layers to the CEO. It's a very large organization, and so to have that kind of sponsorship is excellent. In our automation steering committee, we have the heads of almost all the corporate functions, which is our focus initially. So we've got the head of IT, the head of HR, the head of supply chain management, and then the head of staffing, which is great, and finance as well. The automation CUE is staffed. That's my team. We work closely with our vendor. We do have a program office that we do reporting to, or provide reporting to, I should say. And then working, at the more of the operational level, each department, the department head is assigned as the executive sponsor for the automation work in their portfolio. They assign an RPA champion who is accountable really for working with the management team, collecting the automation opportunities, and kind of making sure to keep an eye on the change management aspects. So supporting communication to the departments, supporting to the department managers, to the leaders, and then naturally down to the staff. Whenever we're implementing new automations that impact them, we want to make sure that we communicate clearly so that they know the upcoming automation and how it will impact them. So you can kind of, what I'm trying to get at is change management is really key, and it's layered. From a Fusion team perspective, we have our automation CUE project manager who tracks all of the different automations. So we've got over 50 different projects that are actually chartered in our CAPPM tool. We have a business process me who's assigned to each automation, who knows the process the best. So it's really important, I think, to layer on that project management for tracking of tasks to make sure work gets done, then bringing in the business who knows the process the best, and then the RPA developer, of course, to develop the automation. The next discussion, I think, is what is the scope of the CUE? What is the scope of the type of work that goes through here? And so naturally, we're still having discussions on whether in-system automation is included in scope, and currently we're trying to remove in-system automation, but a lot of teams focus strictly on RPA, and I think the benefit is it's easier. You got a smaller team, but the cons are RPA isn't always the best case. Now maybe there's an API that you could use, which frankly you can use in RPA, bad example. But maybe there's a website or something like that that you want to front end the systems. The point is, when you were looking at an end-to-end process, specific tasks are great candidates for RPA, and maybe another couple steps in the process you need a website or some other mechanism. And so looking at it holistically and actually picking the best technology for each of the different steps in the process is how we're approaching it. I think it allows you to support more use cases. The downside is there's a lot more stakeholders, and so working through the political nature of overlapping services in the context of IT or potentially even business areas, there's a cost. But in for our team, it's had a lot of benefit. From a pipeline perspective, collecting the automation opportunities is key. As I mentioned, the RPA champions or the automation champions are assigned to work in their business area to collect the ideas in their own business area, department. And so we've got a really cool intake form, which we've leveraged a lot of the work that NHS did in their intake form, which is publicly available, and appended a bit more of the logic, which allows the business to actually estimate the cost of automations without even talking to us. So my team is not involved in costing of automations until later stages. So at the ideation stage of the business is literally the managers and the leads and the staff are have frequent meetings with the RPA champion. The RPA champion basically collects these ideas in a single Excel document that has one column per automation. We collect around 20 different points of data on each automation, and the output is a calculated return on investment timeline. So you can see that this we're going to have the cost of this automation will be paid off within 6 months or 8 months. That secondly, the 1 year benefit as well as the ongoing benefit annually after that. So those three measures are key prioritization mechanisms for the business to prioritize their automations. Then our steering committee takes a look, prioritizes them further, and if the business is okay and wants to push an automation forward, and if the steering committee wants us to work on it, we begin work on it. And so we then go through, we work with the business to clearly articulate the exact process that they want us to automate in the form of a PDD, which is the process definition document. The process definition document is for the most part largely automated in itself through the use of a tool called Captivate, and so which is similar to Step Recorder, but it allows a lot more complex recording of processes and branching, which is integral to any automation, because you don't want to know the 80% process. You want to know other options and the standard deviations in the process. So we basically take all the PDD stuff. There's further prioritization if the scope changes too much, and then as time progresses, we move into the development stage, design the automation in the STD, and then naturally begin development. So from a collecting perspective, it's really important that it's easy. And in our case, we've built this intake form, which if anybody's interested, happy to share it, which calculates all the development costs and is a nice and easy method for the business to collect and prioritize their automations. Governance committee prioritization. Now, there are many options, and just having worked a lot in the strategic side in the technology stack and other areas, I've seen elaborate models where you've got kind of 20 different columns and in an Excel sheet, and you're recording the strategic alignment and payback period and how fast are we going to get a return on investment and other key measures. In our case, we don't use any of them. The business basically prioritizes their own automations, and what that looks like is, for example, in finance, they probably have at least 50 plus automation opportunities that they've identified. They've submitted maybe 5 to 10, and each of those automation opportunities then are reviewed, and there's a presentation. The steering committee has either a thumb up or a thumb down. At the point that it comes to my team, we handle them in FIFO. Now, a lot of people might say, oh, that's too risky, and you're not focused on return on investment and payback period, and that's true. But what we've seen is by giving every department a piece of the action, they're all happy. And the second benefit is that sometimes you just simply need to do an automation with a poor return on investment to get buy-in and to get people excited about the opportunity for automation and to instill the notion that these automations have benefit. So once we implement these automations and then gain their trust, then it's we typically see a spur of activity and submissions. From an operating model, there's centralized and decentralized from an automation COE perspective. In our case, we are very much focused on centralized. And why? Because every organization that I've met has started with centralized. And so I think it's actually, with the exception of one, I did meet one 2 days ago that was a large organization, government organization that was doing decentralized. Now, there's pros and cons, and I think it really does depend on the organization. But I guess the point is that RPA is a very technical competency. You want to make sure that the infrastructure is set up to be completely resilient, and that there's a cost to that. And setting up two environments costs twice as much. Secondly, having resources that you can backfill and call in the evenings and things like this means that for most organizations, you want to make sure you've got 2-3 people that are capable of supporting things in the evenings or in the event that you run into issues. Ramping up, in our case, we naturally looked to external resources, heavily in the beginning, and as time has progressed, we've kept those numbers probably a little bit smaller than what we started with, but we've started to augment with students and onboarded additional resources in our team. And so we now have a nice mix, in my opinion, of staff, students, and external resources, and shifted a lot of the external purchase services from development of RPA automations to supporting us in reviewing our doing quality assurance. Excuse me, automating or not automating, but reviewing our operating model, and which is we refer to as our automation COE, which I'll speak to shortly. And then taking the students to do a lot of automation work in designing the objects, and then naturally moving our staff to be more of a senior role, and helping to architect automations that may cross code that may be functional across 2 or 3 automations, and making sure that we're designing things in a very reusable manner. The Blue Prism robotic operating model is where we started. Almost all of our documents, which we've got probably around 20 different documents in total, but one main one that covers the end-to-end process. The foundations for a lot of those concepts came from the ROM, and I would definitely suggest checking it out. It's free. It's a compilation of around 100 different robotic operating model documents that cover the main areas that are on the screen. From a project delivery approach, we naturally start with collecting the ideas, like I mentioned, through the RPA champions. I think it's really key to push a lot of that intake and discovery to the business. They know their business the best, and having a person embedded in their team who knows their business, that can meet with their managers and their leaders, is something I think that there's benefit in having the business do it, because oftentimes the automation developers don't have the business competency and they don't have the connections. It's just it's one thing that's worked well for us. After we collect the ideas, naturally the business prioritizes them. Then they go to the automation steering committee, and we work through the analysis and design stage, document the PDD like we mentioned, or like I mentioned, and then go to proceed basically with the design of the automation and the implementation. One of the key differences, I think, that in areas that we are focused is process mining, which we'll go through a slide or two on that in the future. Process documentation is obviously extremely important, because it's important that we have a repeatable process that's proven. And so my whole staff are trained on what we call the automation COE way, which details all of our roles, has a nice clear RACI, has the entire end-to-end process, not just for the project side, but for the operations, and covers everything in detail. This is basically a table of contents from a couple of versions back, but the point is that anything you need to know in the context of the automation COE way, or the automation COE processes, is covered in this document, and there are links to supporting documents in some cases, but it's not needed. This covers it all. The business process documentation piece takes a heck of a lot of effort. If you're going to do it manually and create a Visio diagram, it can literally take months, and especially for larger teams. So we work with some teams that are one team specifically that has 300 individuals in it, and they have 10 offices and 26 teams. And as you can imagine, with such a large organization, some of the teams don't do things exactly the same way as the other teams. So the ability to actually capture the business process, map it out, and add branching logic and add comments and taking screenshots, and then exporting that work to a Visio diagram, and more importantly, to the Blue Prism software, so that we can actually draft our automations, adds a lot of value. Once again, it's free, so you can check that out. We found it to be extremely valuable and much more effective than Microsoft Step Recorder or other tools that are out there. Our use cases, so far, we are sending out a ton of letters. So we send out offer letters in our HR system. We send out regret letters if a person didn't get a job. We send out cancellation letters. We're completing tasks in our new hire process that speeds up the delivery of allows us to hire people more quickly. Position changes, we're handling a lot of that now with the automation work that we're doing. Terminations, many of the steps in the termination process are automated. We're forklifting data from one system to another in the finance team. Right now, whenever you complete your online training for the finance system, the automation will detect that training that's been complete and automatically provision access. CPSM, which is our supply chain management team, we're flagging issues, from an auditing perspective, and loading data from one system, in our case Epic, to Oracle Financials. Staff scheduling, we're helping with our shift and our scheduling processes from an audit perspective, reporting perspective, DR perspective, and then naturally operationally canceling and rebroadcasting shifts. On the IT side, we're just kind of getting kicked off with a lot of the IT work right now, but our primary focus is on supporting the IT access and the desktop team. And I would add the service desk as well, which are kind of the tripod of demand in most IT organizations, since around 50% of tickets on the request side are typically IT access related, and more than 50% of the incidents are actually done and managed by the service desk. Use cases, I think whenever you're presenting RPA, a lot of eyes are going to get glossed over. And so working through and presenting use cases in the viewpoint and in the background of the business area that you're meeting with is really important. So this deck or in this link, which you can should be in the handouts, allows you to pick and choose specific use cases when you're meeting with finance or when you're meeting with supply chain management or a contact center. So that's my collection. From a privacy and security perspective, naturally, RPA is new, and right when you're kicking off a new program, there's going to be a lot of people that raise concerns about automation, digital workers processing HR content, or maybe working in a clinical system, or how things are logged in and the access that's related to them. So from our perspective, we engaged privacy extremely early, and our information risk management team reviewed the whole plan, and the consensus is that for the most part, our automations are doing the same work that humans are doing today. And these humans are following a process that's been audited. And so by starting the conversation like that, it does kind of at least bring down a few of the barriers. Secondly, we follow whatever access process that humans follow. So when we started, there was quite a few different discussions around, hey, should we follow it? If a digital worker needed access to a system, should we have a dedicated RPA access process just to get the RPA accounts access to the enterprise systems? And we've right from the get-go, we've always said, hey, no, you have an audited, proven process for humans. We're going to follow the same process, and that's really allowed us to speed up access provisioning, which initially took, in the case of some of our earlier systems, up to 4 to 6 weeks to get access to a system. And now, we often get access within the same day, maybe 2-3 days. So it's made a big difference. We also have a standard naming convention for all of our accounts so that you can easily see that they are doing RPA. Number two, in the actual system, you can see that the manager of that account is linked to my team so that we can actually, the IT groups can actually get support faster. OCM is extremely important. You know, the success of any program, how to start, you know, certainly I think, you know, finding visible sponsors is probably the number one. Number two is acknowledging and planning for anxiety and resistance. So a lot of these different, you know, staff, when they start hearing about bots and, you know, they immediately jump to Terminator movies and explaining to them that, you know, these digital workers don't, you know, they're not autonomous. They can't, you know, figure things out by themselves. You have to train them in the exact same way that people get trained. You have to provision a computer just like a staff, and embedding the notion that that teams are moving to both digital and staff resources, and that they're all basically part of the same team and they're passing the baton of work back and forth. I think helps a lot. Secondly, mitigating you know, concerns about job security and the impact on work. And you know, if your work changes, we're going to work with you. We're going to provide training and make sure that you you know, that get the work that you hate. I love in the earlier presentation, you know, if you hate it, automate it. I think that's a great tagline, and I think it allows us to work through those notions that are preconceived ideas around automation that people fear. Proving the value. So one of the naturally, with an analytical background in data warehousing, we ingest the records from our Blue Prism system into a reporting database, and then we present that data in a dashboard that's updated every 15 minutes. So for every single stakeholder in the organization, you can actually see the exact automations, how many minutes that it takes that each queue item saves the organization if it's successfully processed. Excuse me, how many minutes of time that the business exceptions, which are the cases where the automation has been trained not to do, to handle a specific queue item, which sometimes save time as well. How many minutes each of the, if you take the queue items that were successful times 10 minutes, and you know, the business exceptions times in 0 cases for the top example, the total amount of minutes saved across the organization is 3,000 hours. And then if we look at the time that was saved to date, if you translate that into an FTE, it's 1.69. And if you extrapolate that out to the year, it's 2.31. So by having that visibility and a dashboard that's updated in near real time, you prove your value. And it's a you know, literally I can forklift this our detailed dashboard directly into our you know, any type of senior presentations or presentations that I'm working on to show that, hey, we don't have just, you know, theoretical value, we have proven value. And I'm sure there's going to be questions around, you know, how do we translate this financially? And certainly we have the capability. We do know the salaries of each of the different automations, the average salaries for each of the automations. So we can translate those into actual financials as well. But for the public dashboards, which is a public dashboard, we don't present that data. Architecture. So we have done a lot of work on this. And so, you know, when you're implementing digital workers, you've got choices, and really you've got, you know, 3 depending on the solution that you're implementing. You have either virtual servers, which, you know, are costly, virtual desktops, which are around 39% lower cost, and then you've got, you know, basically RDSH, which is the remote desktop services. Anyway, it's kind of Microsoft's Citrix technology, which we are looking into, and has actually a significantly lower cost. But currently we're on servers, and we are around 60% migrated now, I think, to desktops. So we've kind of jumped from 1 to 2, and we're looking at 3 as a potential for the future. Digital workers need time off. So when you're planning your especially at the business case level, and in our case, the costing that's actually embedded in our intake form, we don't plan for automations to work 24/7. You know, the digital workers, they can't run 24/7. You got to patch them, you have to upgrade them, you have to, the enterprise systems need to be upgraded. The database has to be upgraded. And so, yeah, my point is just to make sure that you've got a little bit of leeway to give yourself room, that if the digital workers are unavailable for a period, that you can rush. You've got that extra capacity to run multiple digital workers at the same time for a automation that's a priority. The technology assessment. So we do go through a very elaborate process of understanding each of the detailed steps in the process from the PDD. Then we have meetings with our enterprise architects, our IT service owners, our application owners, our business owners, the privacy team, depending on if you know, there's privileged data, whether it's clinical or employee data, and we work through for each of the different steps in the process, what is the best technology to automate that specific step. Now, this is a Southern company diagram, which I like, which is on Gartner, for those that have a Gartner account. The ability to actually go through each of the different steps in the automation and discern, is this a robotic desktop automation? You know, basically for any type of you know, live automation that you want to support your end users, potentially your service desks, you know, maybe a high administrative role. Is there an opportunity to use robotic process automation for anything that needs to be scheduled? You know, I think that's typically the primary technology. The API, now naturally robotic process automation can use APIs, but the point is, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to use infrastructure automation tools, then which we have in our organization. Secondly is the ETL processes and integration tools like, you know, Cloverleaf and SQL Server integration services, which we do use SQL Server integration services extensively to ingest data. We ingest data from probably 300 different enterprise systems right now. The digital assistance is one area that we're heavily looking into right now. So we do have a service now for our IT and HR ticketing system, which has a really great you know, chatbot capability. We're also looking into a couple others. But the point is, I think having the ability for the end users to you know, communicate in the way that they want to with the automations, the RPA automations, that's the best model. So we have you know, chatbot capabilities. We have automations that are triggered through email. We have we're working on automations that are triggered by email. We have automations that are triggered, or that we're intending to trigger from web form replacements. We know tools, whether that's Interact or whether it's a, you know, custom-made website. And then we have automations that get triggered from files. So some in our we have some automations that the end users will literally, in the business, will drop files into a folder. The automation works and it moves that file to the completed folder. And then lastly is the cognitive computing piece, which is really that AI, you know, NLP, ML piece. And so each of the different tools, whether you're using any of the larger tools, they all have that capability to use AI or integrate with using an API with, you know, Google Cognitive Services or, you know, Microsoft, any of the different IBM Watson, any of the online solutions. And so the point is that RPA is an entire stack of solutions that you can use to automate. And above that, there's other technologies that you can use to help feed data into the RPA automation. But looking at it holistically allows you to support a lot more use cases and hammer out automations faster. The identification of automations. And so, you know, when we're going through automations, a lot of teams, not a lot of teams, I should say, some teams have challenges coming up with ideas, which is a valid, you know, concern. You know, it could be corporate culture, it could be the fact that they're not technical, or the fact that they've been doing a process for a long time and they don't have that viewpoint because of potentially, you know, blinders of other ways that they could do it, or that a digital worker could even do it. So training them on what RPA automation or RPA can actually offer, will get you a long ways down the path. But for some, they need help. Now, the second concern is that naturally at the root of every single business case for RPA is the task duration. So if you take an automation that's 100,000 documents that are processed per year, and each one on average takes a minute of human effort to actually automate, you're looking at 100,000 hours, minutes, whatever the time duration of the task is. Now, when you're looking at the benefit, typically we extrapolate that number from the 1 unit out to a year, out to 5 years. So it's extrapolated many times, which leads to inaccuracy, which is why the task duration is an integral amount of, is integral to any business case. So typically for our automations we work through, we use Capture, and we actually record the duration of the automations at least 3 times to give us a sense of, like, is this an accurate number? But one opportunity that we're looking into right now is process mining. Now, process mining helps an organization, at least in principle, and we're still working through this, 2 ways. Number one, it allows you to validate the duration of the task, which is the key measure in the business case. Secondly, it allows you to potentially identify new automation opportunities in teams that don't have a great sense of that. The way that it works is effectively by scanning log files. So in our case, we're looking at ServiceNow initially. And so we're ingesting the log files from ServiceNow literally as we speak today and tomorrow, hopefully. But we're working with the application teams to get those extracts. They load that into different software tools. There's Celonis, there's Abby Timeline. Then that data literally gets run through a machine learning algorithm, which is that middle step. And all of a sudden you see a view of the events. And those events get rolled up into processes. So you can actually start to see and understand 90% of the ticket, or 100% start here, 80% flow through to this next step, and then a portion of the tickets actually come back, or maybe it's the portion of the invoices, or maybe it's a portion of the patients. So process mining, I think, has really great promise. We are looking into it, and to understand not just the process of the one person that we picked to record their, through Step Recorder or through Capture or through whatever tool that your organization uses, but to get a sense of across all the people in all departments that use this system, how do they actually process things? And more broadly, you can actually ingest the log files, not just from one system, but from multiples. So you can see kind of an end-to-end view of the different items that have occurred in the process. Task mining is the second technology, which I think is worth considering. Most process mining solutions offer task mining. Process mining is looking at the log files. Task mining is following the exact same process, but looking at looking at recordings of the actions of staff on the work that they do on their screen. So the machine learning goes through the same kind of methodology, looks at all the different screens that were recorded, and then naturally collects the steps, identifies the steps, rolls them into processes, and then bumps those processes. It allows you to do analytical work on the processes to figure out which ones are optimal for automation. The recordings on the screen, I should add, most tools allow you to exclude things, not just include. So, include everything is where I was leading. So we can say, hey, we don't want to include Facebook Messenger, we don't want to include Gmail, or anything else that's private. So you've got that capability to record the work that people are doing in a bit more of a non-intrusive manner. The machine learning rolls it into processes, and then you can use all of this data to allow you to actually see across multiple users and across multiple teams the precise steps that work is being done in, compared to process mining, which is more at the system level and a little bit less detail. So most organizations, they start with process mining to kind of delve into big picture into the areas, and then use task mining to drill down into that detailed task level view. So from next steps, my team is, at least in a short period of time, we are zeroing right into IT. So we started off with HR, extended into finance and CPSM, and naturally the staff scheduling teams. Our next area of focus is IT. And so, naturally with, 2,700 people, we have, there's certainly opportunities and the onboarding of process mining on the ServiceNow tool. We are hoping to use and approach IT with a bit more of a data-driven approach compared to just working through and actually collecting the automation opportunities to increase the return on investment from the automation work. And secondly, validate the task durations, like I mentioned. We're also, frankly, we've already implemented Decipher, which is the Blue Prism OCR tool. So we are working on ingesting financial forms that are in PDF form, extracting the unstructured data, like the blobs of text on them, and then loading that into our Oracle financial system. So having that capability to do OCR on PDFs is another tool in the toolkit, which is kind of part of that cognitive function that I mentioned, the AI capabilities. Next up, we are going to be implementing Interact, which is a web form replacement tool. As I mentioned, having the ability for end users to be able to interact with the automations, or the digital workers, the way that they want to. Interact has the capability to trigger to simply have a form on the screen, similar to all of our existing PDF forms that you fill out every day, and then triggering the automation to trigger the second that the person clicks submit at the bottom of the form. So allowing us to have that web form replacement in our organization. We have literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of forms. And so there's great opportunity to take those forms and have the work done in the automations. Lastly, next 4 to 6 months, we are already kicking off meetings to start to look at process mining of Oracle financials. And after we get that done, certainly the next intention is to start looking at Epic, which is our electronic medical record system, which is used by around 40,000 people so far, and will be used by over 100,000 in the coming years as we migrate people to it. So having an understanding of the processes that people do on the corporate side and on the clinical side is kind of our approach to spurring and identifying high opportunity or the automation opportunities that have a high return on investment, and kind of focusing our efforts on those. And that's it. Any questions?
Justin, if you could please leave that screen on just for a second, just so if anybody wants to write that down, because that's what I wanted to suggest. Anybody can capture that, screen capture, or you can get the information later after the session is over. We've only got a couple of minutes left. We're going to end. We were supposed to end in about 1 minute, so anybody can drop off when they need to. We will absolutely end in about 4 minutes, no matter what, to get ready for the next session. Got a couple of quick questions for you, Jesse. And first of all, fantastic, comprehensive proposal. I got lots of questions about, can I get this deck? They're going to ask you all kinds of questions because you covered an entire deployment from end to end. And there's a million questions along the way. 2 specific ones. Your interaction with caregivers and the question of health records. Because there's in the United States, it would be called HIPAA. I don't know what it's called in Canada, but can you talk to how do the caregivers, who are notoriously resistant to change, how are they dealing with this, and what do you deal with the health records?
Sure. Yeah, great question. And so to date, we've focused almost solely on corporate. So we're still in kind of our working through. We've accomplished our first year of automations, and all of our work, for the most part, has been centered on the corporate functions. So we haven't actually we've interacted with the medical systems but from a financial or a corporate function perspective. So we haven't really gotten into those areas yet, and I look forward to exploring that in the second year.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about your thoughts on, if you had to rate 0 to 10 fear of automation across the system right now? Where do you think that? I know it varies depending on who's, but how would you rate that?
I would say probably kind of in the 40% range. It is significant and it needs to be thought through. And I think the concern isn't around automating the work that people don't like doing. They love it.
Right.
The concern is about quality, reliability, and the impact on their jobs. And I think you do need to speak to each of those.
Fair point. I think you could even read a book on that. Anyway.
Sure. There you go.
Oh, never mind. One other question about interacting with the health records. Have you touched any of the actual, security health record stuff?
We have not. No. We've gone through the privacy impact assessments for all of our different automations, and in all cases we can interact with those, just like every other enterprise system interacts with health records. Right. But in the context of we're automating the work that people are doing today, the work that they're doing today has already gone through those processes and been reviewed. So no, I don't foresee any issues at all.
Oh, good. I want to thank William Fuller, who's online, for asking. He's just asked a series of great questions. It's like, I wish I'd asked you. I paid him to do that, but I didn't. He's just asking great questions. Jesse, thank you very much for taking us through that. Healthcare is obviously important on a personal level. It's massively important considering how big the industry is across the entire world. You've given a great example of how to use that. I happen to know personally that Blue Prism, rock solid company, produces fantastic products, and their documentation is incredible. And no, I'm not getting paid for that. I just worked with Blue Prism several times when I was in Europe. So thank you very much, Jesse, for everything you had. If anyone wants to reach out to Jesse, his contact information is on the screen, which I'm about to tell him to press stop sharing. So look at it quickly. And Jesse, you'll probably get the phone ringing and people will connect to you on LinkedIn.
Sounds great. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back in 10 minutes, top of the hour, for the next session. And that's it.